Once upon a time, there was a little girl. And she, at least in the eyes of her parents and teachers, was a very bad little girl. Of course, she didn't think so. She thought she was perfect the way she was. But the adults around her always seemed to disagree. They wanted her to eat her broccoli. They wanted her to take her medicine. She wasn't interested in any of that. She didn't want to do homework. She didn't want to do chores. She wanted to be out in the dang woods, fording a treacherous river, scaling tall, dangerous trees. She wanted to excavate nearby caves and passageways. She was an explorer. But her parents and teachers, they didn't believe in her. They just couldn't hear her when she said that she was meant for something outside of this little box they had made for her. All they did was scold and doubt and punish and lecture. And one day the little girl decided she just couldn't tolerate it anymore. If she couldn't get the adults around her to understand that she was never going to grow up to be an insurance salesperson or an economist or a shoe cobbler, if the adults couldn't learn to at least tolerate her, she was going to find something else for herself. And so she set out one night into the woods. And she crossed that dangerous river and climbed a treacherous tree to get up to a cliff face. And up above, on the jagged, craggy outcropping, was a tunnel, a cave. It was everything she had wanted. It was the perfect scenario that she had dreamed of. And with her flashlight, she started to venture into the cave. And the further she got in, the darker it got, and the quieter it became. And at first, this is exactly what she had wanted, but as she got deeper into the cave, and the world behind her disappeared, she started to doubt herself. She started to get worried that perhaps she had gotten herself in over her head. Maybe she shouldn't have eaten her broccoli. Maybe she should have taken her medicine. Maybe she should have done her homework. She didn't want to think those things. But she was all alone in this cave now. But just as the little girl was starting to consider turning back and going home, there was a noise. She stopped and stood perfectly still so she could hear more clearly. It sounded like voices. And all at once, all of the fear and doubt disappeared from the little girl's mind, replaced immediately, once again, by her unstoppable curiosity and courage. She needed to know, and she was brave enough to find out, so she kept going further and further into the cave, following the sound of the voices, through branching paths, always following the sound as it got slightly louder, and then louder, and then louder still. They were definitely voices. And they sounded like children's voices. And finally, just as the battery in her flashlight was starting to die out, the tunnel she was in opened up into a vast underground cavern, huger than huge, and full of glittering spires and treacherous jungle gyms and amusement parks and laboratories and safaris and everything she had dreamed of. And she looked down into the cavern and she realized that the cavern was full of all the other little girls who hadn't wanted to eat their broccoli. who didn't want to take their medicine or do their homework. All the other little girls who had struck out into the world to build something for themselves. And she knew that she was home.